There is nothing more cringeworthy than that of a socialist who says that the Soviet Union or North Korea aren't the true face of socialism, or what we've seen in Cuba, etc., etc.
I could respond by denying that these regimes were really socialist.
It's always a case that, oh, it's not true socialism. Many of them do come out with the argument about workers' control over the means of production, or workers' ownership of the means of production. As I've said many times before, you could look at the definition of socialism. Yes, it will say something along the lines of in the hands of the community, but it also mentions stuff about state ownership of the means of production. It does mention that within the dictionary definitions. What they don't seem to understand is the difference between what you have theoretically to that of what you basically put into practice. So stick with me as we're going to move on to one of the most fallacious arguments from the critics against capitalism on how capitalism has apparently killed tens of millions of people.
In order to calculate the death toll of capitalism, we need to look at what capitalism is. It's an economic system based on the private ownership of the means of production, distribution, and exchange. So how many people in contemporary society, let alone across capitalism's long history, die due to this economic system?
However, it's an oversimplification. He doesn't touch upon the very fact that capitalism is an antonymous system to that of collectivism. So capitalism is the complete opposite of everything to do with collectivism. And this is the issue, because capitalism is about true private individual ownership. These people love to try and conflate true private ownership with that of a private sector completely controlled by the state.
Socialism means, among other things, using political agencies to provide goods and services that otherwise would be provided privately in the marketplace. In its most extreme form, socialism means government direction of the economy as a whole.
As if they're two of the same thing.
Socialism, in its milder expressions, takes the form of nationalized industries, the Chilean copper mining industry under Allende, Pakistan's petrochemical sector, and heavy industries under Bhutto, government ownership or direction of firms, Alfa Romeo under Mussolini, the Japan National Railway, direct government provision of goods and services, the British Health Service, or government management of nominally private marketplace activities, farm subsidies in France, Fannie Mae in the United States.
As if to say that the fault of a private sector over-regulated by the state is somehow something to do with capitalism. Well, you cannot do that by this evidence here. Capitalism is an antonymous system to that of collectivism. Therefore, capitalism can only be one thing, an individualist system. Now, what is the definition of individualism? Individualism is defined by the freedom of individuals to pursue their own economic goals and paths, and the freedom from government intervention. Therefore, it's got nothing at all to do with a private sector like what you saw in Nazi Germany. It's a system that basically pertains to the free market. Therefore, it pertains to true private individual ownership. One of the biggest things about socialism, and socialists love to oversimplify the very meaning of socialism. Socialism means that it is collective ownership or control over the means of production. Now, when you speak about collectivism, it doesn't matter whether you want to talk about it being in the hands of the people or it being in the hands of the state. It doesn't matter what the bloody hell it is. If you collectively own or collectively control the means of production, it still is socialism, which is the very reason why in Nazi Germany and so many other places that used strong government regulation that gives the state the control over the private sector, to therefore for the state to completely control collectively the means of production, it still pertains to that of socialism. It might not pertain to their ideology of Marxism. It might not pertain to their ideology around the theory of libertarian socialism. Just because it doesn't pertain to that of their theoretical nonsense doesn't mean to say that it's any less socialist. It still lives up to the definition of socialism because it's collective control over the means of production. If the state gets to control how much you produce, if the state gets to control what you produce, it's as good as the government that's controlling it. collectively. And that's what the likes of Nazi Germany did. And you want to know why they don't want to touch upon this argument between true private ownership and a private sector strongly regulated by the state? Is because they are a colossal difference. They're not even remotely the same thing. One is where the state gets to collectively control the means of production, which pertains to collectivism, which is antonymous to capitalism, and the other is relation to that of a free market. If we were to break it down, and if we were to say to them, yes, we support a free market system, could you point out to me what a free market did to result in the deaths of countless millions of people? They couldn't answer that. There's never been tens of millions of people that died as a result of freedom in the marketplace from government intervention. Let's move on to what he has to say next.
Capitalism is global, and around the world 8 million people die from lack of clean drinking water. Roughly another 8 million people die from hunger, and on top of that, another 3 million die from vaccine-treatable diseases. Adding in room for error, let's just take it to a grand total of 20 million deaths per year due to the lack of food, water, and vaccines.
What on earth is he doing? He's pointing to countries that are rife with socialism, that are so far removed from number one on the Freedom Index, it's unreal. See if he was to actually point out, because as far as I could see, this is the African continent, by the way. The same African continent that is rife with socialism. And again, it's this thing where they try to oversimplify everything, where everything's in a cardboard box in their entire world, where, oh look, there's a private sector here, oh look, there's private ownership here. Therefore, that must mean capitalism. Does he even touch upon the very fact that their private sector's been overregulated by the state? I mean, how can you sit more than 70th on the Freedom Index, sitting away on the oppressed end of the scale, and then try and pass that off as the blame on capitalism and say that yes, free markets is the reason they've got a lack of food? That's rather quite interesting, that. So if that's the case, then could you please explain to me why that doesn't exist in somewhere like Hong Kong that sits number one on the Freedom Index?
Why is that the result of capitalism? Well, I'm glad you asked. Under capitalism, production is organised to produce profit. That's just how it is, rather than satisfying people's needs.
Under capitalism, the only way that you are going to make a profit is by providing a service to your customers. And if you do not provide a service to your customers, your business reputation's not going to do very well up against your competition. Now, as we pointed out, capitalism's an individualist system, which means the freedom of the economy from government intervention. So yes, we're talking about a free market system, which we don't live under. The way you try to paint that is as if to say, well, they just produce whatever the hell they like. They just throw it out there, you know, without even concerning over their business reputation, because apparently business reputation just doesn't exist in your world, and as if competition doesn't even exist. And they can just throw it out there in the market, and people will just be robots and just buy it. How did that turn out, by the way, when it came to Samsung's S7 mobile phone that went on fire? Did that turn out well, son? Nah, it didn't turn out well, did it, son? No, it didn't, that's right. What happened? What happened to the products that caught fire? Did you forget the fact that Samsung actually have competition as well? And again, it all goes back to this theoretical Marxist, left-wing, economic degenerate nonsense. He doesn't seem to understand the real world, that in competition, in businesses, they have what you call return services. So yes, customers can buy products, but they can easily take the product back within a 30-day time period. And why does that exist? Number one, because of competition. Number two, because of what consumer demand did. It's because of business reputation. It's so childish, folk. I'm sorry, I can't say this in any other way. It's the most idiotic view that anyone could have. Why? Because customers have a choice. The products that are not selling is where the losses are.
As a result, many people's needs are not met because there's no profit in doing so.
If a business wants to make a profit, it's going to have to produce for what customers do want. That's how they make profits. They don't make a profit by saying, oh, I'll just throw out there a product I'm not going to buy, and I'll just throw it out there, and voila! They'll just buy it. That's evidence that the education system has seriously failed you.
Despite the fact that we have more than enough resources for everyone on Earth to have a comfortable existence.
And there proves the evidence that you've never studied the study of economics. The reason for why the study of economics exists is because there's not enough resources to go around everyone. If resources were infinite, there would be no requirement to economise. That's the whole purpose of why this study of economics came to existence.
The 20 million people who die each year are not dying because life just sucks and this is the way that things are. No, they die from very easily treatable problems. Right now we overproduce food. There's plenty available, and we waste a huge chunk of it anyway. We could cover the cost of providing water and sanitations if all Americans put the $10 billion they spend on ice cream each year into a giant money pot.
So there are two problems with that argument. The first problem is the fact that you're going on about the African continent that is rife with socialism, not capitalism. Yes, they have a private sector, but the private sector's over-regulated by the state. And then the second problem with your argument is to do with the foreign aid. The foreign aid has proven to be a failure. It doesn't work. Because all you do is you give foreign aid to these poor countries, and the money goes into the hands of the corrupt few. It goes into the hands of their governments, and they get very little in return. So all it's doing is passing from one corrupt government over to another corrupt government. The foreign aid doesn't work. Explain to me why Hong Kong isn't faced with those food shortage problems, because it's more capitalist than what, the African continent is. Exactly. You can't answer that question. Why? Because it contradicts you.
Likewise, if the top 5 business people gave a mere 10% of their money towards world hunger, or just 3% towards clean water, they would be more than eradicated. This should then make you ask, well, why don't they? Because it doesn't matter to them. Money and power matters to them. Millions more will starve every single year simply because capitalists care more about themselves and their stock portfolios than they do about real human beings.
So in your argument, you think that having the African continent being extremely poor is somehow beneficial for them? If these people had more money in their pockets, if these people were better off in terms of wealth, that's more profit in the hands of businesses. Another thing that contradicts you is the fact that businesses and investors go where there are freer economies. Take for example what happened in Chile when it freed up its economy. Take for example Hong Kong. Now the reason why these countries are not in that position is because businesses pulled out. Because investors pulled out. What would be the point running business in a place that's oppressed, where they tax them half to death? That's not going to benefit businesses. So this idea that it's because businesses care about profits over people is just nonsense. The mindset of a socialist is truly remarkable to me, and there's no better example than the company of Apple. They say that a company like Apple is so greedy. Is that why customers go back to them every single year and buy their products and benefit from their products every single year? It doesn't matter what you say about the price. People were willing to pay for it, and people benefit from their products every single year. If you're trying to tell me that people did not benefit from that, and people did not get something in return from it, that's just nonsense. These companies have actually better improved the material standards of living of people in more ways than one, just from one little device. And that's the issue, because the way you try to paint it is as if customers get nothing and all these companies get is just profits and that's it. It's not the fault of businesses in the United States of America, or the fault of what's happening in Great Britain for the reason why these countries all over the African continent are sitting in poverty. That's to blame in the very socialism that's rife within the African continent. So just an illogical argument.
In recent news, Grenfell Tower caught fire because the owners installed dangerous refurbishments that make it look prettier to the surrounding area, whilst ignoring all the calls for proper fire safety precautions to be installed.
It was a very sad thing that happened with regards to the Grenfell Towers, and many people lost their lives. And within this current system, which is why I don't understand why you use this argument, as it's in the absence of a capitalist system, in the absence of a free market, these construction companies got away with building with that type of material, and eventually it was unsafe, and the people did call out for measures to be put in place, for safety things to be put in, I think sprinkler system, etc, etc, and they were neglected by the government. So there's a fault in two parts there. Yes, it would be a fault for the construction companies. We live within a system today, I don't even know how you can pass this off as capitalism, but we live in a system today, living in the absence of fierce competition, that's living in the absence of a system that punishes failure and rewards success. So within a free market system, companies that are incompetent like that, they wouldn't last long. They just wouldn't. Those who perform best, those who perform to match their reputation, they are the ones who would dominate the market with regards to who would build your housing, etc, etc. Now, I don't believe there's any such thing as, perfection. There isn't. There's no such thing as perfection, and mistakes can happen. But this is what you live in the absence of. You're living in an over-regulated market, but all of this is in the absence of a free market. I mean, even the fire department itself is run by the government, and within a free market system, the people have the demand. In other words, the property owner, it could be the owner of the flats. The property owner would have the ability to demand from their local fire department what they want and put in place, and they would pay for that, and they would get the service. That's not how your system works today. Your system works where your fire department are run by the government, and lo and behold, it's neglectful and it's inefficient. However, your answer to everything is what? Socialism? What's that going to do for people?
You will turn to me and say, that's not true capitalism, that's corporatism. Not this nice fancy form of capitalism that economists like Mises, Bastiat, Locke or Smith imagined. These same people will then go on to claim that capitalism is bringing millions of people from the third world out of poverty. But how can it be if we live under corporatism and not capitalism?
Because these same people don't know what a capitalist system is. A capitalist system pertains to that of the free market. It's a word that's antonymous to the word collectivism. So you cannot relate capitalism in any shape or form to that of anything at all to do with collectivism. You just can't. Therefore, you cannot pertain capitalism to a system that's collectivist, where you have people forced into a group, where you force taxation out of their hands through an income tax, collectivism, and the state does the funding for you through collectivism, such as your collectivist NHS, or your collectivist state-run, service through a fire department, etc, etc. You're living under collectivism today, maybe not within the extreme form. However, that does not hide the fact that we do not live within a capitalist system. Yes, we do live under corporatism, and they are not the same thing. Corporatism is economic fascism, and fascism is a collectivist system. It's a form and branch of socialism. Yes, capitalism's present, not the capitalist system, don't confuse it, where you have capitalism, and then you have socialism within the mixed economy, and through socialism strangling capitalism half to death within this mixed economy, you end up with a system called corporatism. In other words, you use the elements of capitalism, but you strangle it half to death through strong socialist government regulations. Capitalism's not about a government strongly regulating your private sector.
In its most extreme form, socialism means government direction of the economy as a whole. Government ownership or direction of firms, Alfa Romeo under Mussolini, the Japan National Railway, direct government provision of goods and services, the British Health Service, or government management of nominally private marketplace activities.
Capitalism's about a free market. Capitalism is about a system regulating itself. How the hell could you pass today's economy off as being capitalist when you have a central banking system? When you're sitting there where your interest rates are being controlled by a central bank. Controlling and manipulating interest rates through socialist price fixing is not capitalism. It isn't. It isn't true capitalism because it's not capitalism at all. And anybody who says that we live under capitalism today as a system doesn't know what capitalism is. And they don't even know what a free market is. So yes, we might not be living under the extremes of socialism. We might not be living under communism, but we live under a mixed economy, not a capitalist system. How can you blame the freedom of the marketplace on that of what you're seeing today?
So much death, and we haven't even mentioned war yet, which is arguably minor by comparison. Wars and misery that have been spread through the ages and devastated lives, all for the same principles that we hold to be the status quo.
Again, it's so laughable that I point this out. The definition of individualism is as clear as day. Somehow you conflate what the state does and leading us to all of these wars with that of individualism. How did you draw to the conclusion that capitalism, that's right, individualism, had something to do with the government taking us to the war in Iraq and all the other wars? It's got nothing at all to do with capitalism. It's got absolutely nothing at all to do with free markets. That's the fault of your socialism. That's right. All of those wars and all state direction of the economy is socialist. And yes, I don't care if you don't like it. I'm not interested if you don't like facts, but it's a simple fact. The word collectivism, even by definition, is synonymous to the word socialism. How's it free market for that of a government to take control over your economy and start dictating and laying on minimum wage laws and all the rest of it, and then taking you to war through all of its intervention? The very reason why we faced the First and Second World Wars, in case you didn't know, was because the government was growing too big for its own boots. It led on the path of its own, ignoring the free market. So you're trying to say that the free market was the cause of why we went to World War One and World War Two and all these other wars? No, it wasn't. That wasn't the cause. It's not because you have a freedom in the marketplace that results in that. It's quite sad that I have to actually point out again, yes, capitalism's antonymous to that of collectivism, so capitalism can only be individualist. So since capitalism, for a fact, not an opinion, is an individualist system, could you explain to me how individualism led you to all of those wars, please? The definition's there for you to see. Could you explain that? No, you couldn't. You couldn't do it because you're completely irrational. What led you to all of those wars was collectivism. That's right, socialism, within this wonderful mixed economy, all because of yourself.